The day started like any other. Anna, a 28-year-old freelance designer, had just finished her third cup of coffee and was preparing to meet her newest client at the prestigious Cranemore Tower, a gleaming skyscraper in the heart of the city. It was an unusual location for a meeting. Most clients preferred quaint coffee shops or video calls, but Anna wasn't one to question high-paying work. The email she received the previous evening had been brief and mysterious. Subject: Design Opportunity. From cranemore.associates@mail.com. Message: We have reviewed your portfolio and believe your expertise is exactly what we need for an exclusive project. Please meet us at Cranemore Tower, 33rd floor, tomorrow at 11 a.m. Anna thought the tone was odd but brushed it off. Work was work, and she wasn't in a position to decline lucrative gigs. Cranemore Tower was known for its state-of-the-art facilities and breathtaking views. Its elevators were rumored to be the fastest in the city, capable of transporting passengers to the highest floors in under a minute. As Anna entered the tower's pristine marble lobby, she felt a mix of awe and unease. The receptionist greeted her with a professional yet slightly forced smile. "Welcome to Cranemore Tower. Do you have an appointment?" Anna nodded, showing the email on her phone. The receptionist's expression faltered for a fraction of a second, so brief that Anna almost missed it, before she gestured toward the elevators. Elevator 7. It will take you directly to the 33rd floor. Anna thanked her and headed toward the row of elevators. The polished metal doors gleamed under the bright lobby lights. Elevator 7 stood at the far end, its doors already open as if waiting just for her. She hesitated for a moment. There was something strange about the elevator. Its interior looked darker than the others, the lighting slightly dimmer, the atmosphere heavier. But Anna shook off her unease and stepped inside. The panel was simple, numbered buttons from 1 to 50 and a key slot. She pressed 33, and the doors slid shut with a soft hiss. As the elevator began to ascend, a faint hum filled the space. At first, it was calming, a low, mechanical sound. But then, it grew louder, shifting in tone, almost like a deep, guttural growl. Anna frowned, her finger hovering over the emergency stop button. But before she could press it, the elevator jolted violently. The lights flickered, and for a split second, the polished metal walls seemed to shimmer, as though something was crawling beneath the surface. "Calm down, Anna," she muttered to herself. "It's just an old elevator acting up." The elevator stopped abruptly. The display showed 33, and the doors slid open. Anna stepped out, relieved to be on solid ground. But as she looked around, her relief was short-lived. The hallway was wrong. Instead of the sleek, modern design she expected, the corridor before her was aged and decrepit. The walls were cracked and peeling, with a damp, musty smell lingering in the air. The fluorescent lights above flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the floor. "Hello," Anna called out, her voice echoing down the empty hall. No response. She glanced at her phone, hoping to call her client, but there was no signal. The email address seemed to have vanished from her inbox, replaced by a glitchy, corrupted file. Panic began to creep in. She turned back to the elevator, but the doors had already closed. Pressing the call button was useless. The panel didn't light up, and no sound came from within. "Great," Anna muttered, stuck in a creepy old tower. "Just my luck." She decided to walk down the hall, her heels clicking against the cracked tiles. As she passed each door, she noticed that they were all locked. Some had strange symbols carved into the wood, while others seemed burnt, the edges charred and crumbling. At the far end of the hallway, one door stood slightly ajar. A faint light seeped through the crack, accompanied by a soft, rhythmic tapping sound. Against her better judgment, Anna approached the door. Pushing it open slowly, she found herself in what appeared to be an office. The room was in better condition than the hallway, though not by much. A single desk sat in the center, papers scattered across its surface. An old rotary phone rested on the corner, its receiver hanging loosely from the base. On the wall behind the desk hung a large, ornate mirror. Its glass was cracked in several places, and the frame was covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift when Anna looked away. The tapping sound was coming from the mirror. Anna froze, her breath hitching in her throat. The surface of the mirror rippled, like water disturbed by a pebble. And then, she saw it. A shadowy figure moving within the glass. It wasn't her reflection. The figure stepped closer, its form becoming clearer. It was tall and humanoid, but its features were distorted. Its face was obscured, but its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, piercing and malevolent. Anna stumbled backward, her hand knocking over the rotary phone. The clattering sound broke the silence, and the figure's head snapped toward her. "Who are you?" Anna whispered, her voice trembling. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised a hand, pressing its palm against the inside of the glass. The mirror cracked further, the sound sharp and grating, like nails on a chalkboard. Suddenly, the lights in the room went out, plunging Anna into darkness. The darkness around Anna was suffocating. Her breathing was shallow, her heartbeat thundered in her ears, and her palms were slick with sweat. She pressed herself against the wall, willing her eyes to adjust to the black void. But it wasn't normal darkness. It felt alive, heavy, and humming with an unseen energy. Suddenly, the mirror came to life. The cracks on its surface glowed faintly, and the shadowy figure moved again. Its hand pressed harder against the glass, as if testing its strength. Then, a voice, a low, raspy whisper, echoed in the room. "Why, you here?" Anna's knees buckled, and she slid to the floor, clutching her chest to steady her breath. She couldn't find the words to respond. Was the voice coming from the figure, from the room, or was it inside her head? "Leave," the whisper came again, this time louder, more insistent. "I don't know how," Anna cried out, her voice cracking. The mirror's glow intensified. The figure's features became clearer now. A gaunt face with hollow cheeks and glowing white eyes that burned with fury. Its hand pressed harder against the glass, and the cracks spread like spiderwebs. Anna scrambled backward, her hand knocking against something cold and metallic. The rotary phone. Without thinking, she grabbed it and placed the receiver to her ear. Static crackled loudly, almost deafening her. Then, amidst the noise, she heard another voice, a calm, measured tone that contrasted the chaos around her. "Anna," it said, sending a chill down her spine. How do you know my name?" she stammered. "You're in danger. You need to get out of there. Now." "I'm trying. The elevator's broken and—" "No," the voice interrupted sharply. "Not just out of this room. Out of Crane Moore Tower. It's not what it seems." Before Anna could ask more, the static grew louder, and the line went dead. She dropped the phone, her hands trembling. The glow from the mirror dimmed, and for a moment, the room was silent again. Anna tried to compose herself, her mind racing. What was happening? Who was the figure in the mirror? And who was on the phone? She stood up shakily, her legs feeling like jelly, and turned toward the door. But as she took a step forward, the room shifted. The floor groaned beneath her feet. The walls seemed to pulse, and the air grew colder. A shadow moved in the corner of her vision. She spun around, her heart hammering. The figure wasn't in the mirror anymore. It was in the room. Anna's instincts screamed at her to run. She darted toward the door, her hand grasping the cold metal handle. But it wouldn't budge. She yanked it again, harder this time, but it was as if the door had fused to the frame. Behind her, the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps filled the room. Anna, the raspy voice called, "Closer now. Stay away," she shouted, pounding on the door. The footsteps stopped. She turned her head slightly, just enough to see the figure standing a few feet away. Its body was shrouded in dark mist, making it hard to discern its shape. But its eyes, those piercing, glowing eyes, were fixed on her. "You shouldn't have come here," it said, its voice echoing unnaturally. Anna's mind raced. She grabbed a heavy paperweight from the desk and hurled it at the figure. It passed through the mist and clattered to the floor uselessly. "Please," Anna begged. "I don't know what you want." The figure tilted its head, as if studying her. Then, without warning, it lunged. Anna screamed and dropped to the floor just as the shadowy mass surged over her. The room filled with a deafening roar, like a hurricane ripping through a narrow tunnel. She crawled on her hands and knees, desperately searching for an escape. Her hand brushed against something, a trapdoor hidden beneath the desk. Without hesitation, she pulled it open and climbed down into the darkness below. The trapdoor led to a narrow, dimly lit passage. The walls were made of cold, damp stone, and the air smelled of mildew. Anna could hear the faint drip of water echoing somewhere in the distance. She closed the trapdoor above her, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. For the moment, the figure was gone. The passage stretched endlessly in both directions, lit only by small, flickering sconces mounted on the walls. Anna chose a direction at random and started walking, her footsteps echoing eerily. As she moved, she noticed strange markings etched into the stone. Symbols she didn't recognize, accompanied by crude drawings of eyes, hands, and spirals. They seemed to tell a story, but Anna couldn't make sense of it. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft, rhythmic sound. At first, she thought it was her own footsteps, but then she stopped, and the sound continued. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from behind her. Anna turned, her heart pounding. The passage was empty, but the sound grew louder. It was deliberate, like someone or something was tapping against the walls. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. The tapping stopped, and then a voice, low and chilling, whispered, "You can't hide." Anna turned and broke into a run, her lungs burning as she sprinted through the endless corridor. The walls seemed to close in around her, the sconces flickering wildly. Shadows danced along the stone, creating shapes that taunted her as she ran. She didn't stop until she reached the end of the passage, where a rusted metal door stood slightly ajar. Without thinking, she pushed it open and stepped inside. The room beyond the door was unlike anything Anna had ever seen. It was vast and open, with no discernible walls or ceiling. The space was filled with an eerie, pale light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Floating in the air were objects, desks, chairs, books, and even pieces of machinery, all suspended as if gravity had been switched off. Some were intact, while others were broken or twisted into impossible shapes. Anna took a cautious step forward, her breath catching in her throat. The ground beneath her feet felt solid but looked like a swirling, black void. "What is this place?" she whispered. "You've entered the in-between," said a voice behind her. Anna spun around to see a man standing a few feet away. He was tall and lean, dressed in a tattered suit that looked decades out of fashion. His face was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes were hollow. "Who are you?" she demanded. "I'm a watcher," he replied simply. "And you're not supposed to be here." "I didn't mean to come here," Anna said, her voice rising. "I was just trying to take the elevator to a meeting, and..." The elevator, the man interrupted, his tone grim. It doesn't lead where you think it does. Cranemore Tower is a doorway, and you've stepped through it. A doorway to what? To the forgotten places, the man said. Realities that exist between the cracks of our own. Some are harmless. Others are not. Anna felt a chill run down her spine. Can I leave? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man hesitated. There's only one way out, he said finally. But it won't be easy. Anna stood frozen, staring at the pale man before her. His hollow eyes seemed to pierce through her, weighing her every move. The swirling darkness beneath her feet felt alive, shifting slightly with every step she took. What do you mean, one way out? She asked, her voice trembling. The man tilted his head, his expression unreadable. Every path comes with a cost, he said simply. If you want to leave, you must face the choices you've made and the shadows that follow you. Anna swallowed hard. Choices? Shadows? None of this made sense. She just wanted to go back to her normal life, to her safe apartment, to her boring daily routine. How do I get out of here? She pressed. The man extended a bony hand, pointing toward a faint glow in the distance. That door, he said. It will take you closer to the exit. But beware. Each step you take will bring you deeper into this place's grip. The more you fear, the harder it will be to escape. Anna glanced toward the glowing door. It seemed impossibly far away, almost like it was shrinking the longer she looked at it. Why are you helping me? She asked, turning back to the man. His lips twitched into a faint, sad smile. I wasn't always a watcher, he said. I once tried to leave too, but I failed. The weight of his words hit her like a punch to the stomach. Failed? What did that mean? Before she could ask, the man began to fade, his form dissolving into mist. Wait, Anna called out. What happens if I fail? But the man was gone, leaving her alone in the strange, vast space. With no other option, Anna began walking toward the glowing door. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though the ground were pulling her down. The air around her was thick, making it hard to breathe. Objects floated past her. Books with torn pages fluttering as though caught in a breeze, clocks with their hands spinning wildly, and photographs of people she didn't recognize. One photograph caught her attention. It was of a little girl standing in front of a tall, gray building. The girl's face was blurred, but the building was unmistakable. Cranemore Tower, Anna whispered. As soon as she said the name, the photograph crumbled into ash, disappearing before her eyes. A chill ran down her spine. Her steps quickened, her focus narrowing on the door ahead. But the closer she got, the more the air seemed to hum with an ominous energy. Whispers surrounded her, soft at first but growing louder with each step. Anna, why did you come here? You don't belong. She covered her ears, trying to block out the voices, but they only grew louder, more insistent. Shadows began to swirl around her, forming shapes that danced and flickered just out of reach. Stay calm, she muttered to herself. It's not real. It's not real, but it felt real. The whispers, the shadows, the weight pressing down on her chest. All of it felt unbearably real. Suddenly, one of the shadows broke away from the rest, darting toward her. It moved like smoke but had a form, a hunched figure with long, spindly arms and a featureless face. Anna screamed and stumbled backward. The shadow loomed over her, its arms reaching out. Just as it was about to grab her, a flash of light erupted from the glowing door, sending the shadow retreating into the darkness. Anna reached the door, her hands shaking as she pushed it open. Inside was a small, circular room with walls made of mirrored glass. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it lay an old, leather-bound book. The room was eerily quiet, the air heavy with anticipation. Anna approached the pedestal cautiously, her reflection staring back at her from every angle. The book seemed out of place, its worn cover and yellowed pages contrasting with the pristine mirrors. A single word was etched into the cover. "Choices. What is this?" she murmured, running her fingers over the leather. As soon as she touched the book, the mirrors around her shimmered and came to life. Images played out on their surfaces, scenes from her life. She saw herself as a child, crying in her room while her parents argued in the background. She saw herself as a teenager, walking away from a friend who needed her help. She saw herself as an adult, ignoring calls from her estranged mother. Each scene brought a wave of guilt and regret. "Why are you showing me this?" Anna demanded, her voice cracking. The room didn't answer, but the book flipped open on its own, its pages turning rapidly until it stopped on a blank page. Slowly, words began to appear, written in a flowing, ink-black script. "To leave, you must confront your past. Choose wisely, or remain here forever." Anna's hands trembled. "Confront my past? How? What does that even mean?" As if in response, the mirrors shifted again. This time, they showed a new scene. Her standing in the elevator at Cranemore Tower, pressing the button for the top floor. But instead of the normal ding of the elevator, the scene changed. The doors opened to a dark, endless void, and she stepped inside. The mirrors shattered suddenly, the sound deafening. Anna shielded her face, feeling shards of glass rain down around her. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in the mirrored room. She was back in the elevator. The walls were cracked and rusted, the light flickering weakly overhead. The button panel was smeared with dark stains, and the air was thick with a metallic smell. Anna's reflection in the elevator doors stared back at her, but something was off. Her reflection wasn't mirroring her movements. Smiled. Anna stumbled back, her chest tightening. No, this isn't real." Her reflection tilted its head, the smile widening unnaturally. Then it spoke. "Why do you run from yourself, Anna?" "I'm not running," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The reflection laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You've been running your whole life, from your family, your friends, your choices. But you can't run from me." The elevator began to shake violently, the walls groaning as if they were about to collapse. The reflection pressed its hands against the glass, and cracks spiderwebbed across the surface. "Stop it!" Anna screamed. The elevator jolted to a stop, and the doors creaked open. Beyond them was another hallway, bathed in an eerie red light. "You want to leave?" the reflection said, its voice mocking. "Then face what's waiting for you." Anna hesitated, her legs trembling, but she had no choice. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the elevator and into the unknown. Anna's footsteps echoed in the narrow hallway, the red glow casting long shadows on the cracked walls. The air was heavy, carrying a faint metallic scent that made her stomach churn. Her heart pounded as she walked, her senses on high alert for any movement in the oppressive silence. The corridor stretched endlessly, twisting and turning in impossible ways. Sometimes the walls seemed to close in, narrowing until Anna could barely squeeze through. Other times, the space opened up into vast, empty chambers, the eerie red light making her feel exposed and vulnerable. "Keep moving," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. "There has to be a way out." But the farther she went, the more the corridor seemed to resist her progress. The floor felt sticky underfoot, as if trying to hold her back. Whispers filled the air, faint and unintelligible, but growing louder with each step. Then she saw it. A door at the end of the hallway, identical to the one she had entered through earlier. Relief washed over her, and she quickened her pace, ignoring the rising whispers. As she reached for the doorknob, the whispers coalesced into a single voice, sharp and cold. "Anna." She froze, her hand hovering over the handle. Slowly, she turned to face the source of the voice. Standing a few feet away was a figure cloaked in darkness, its form shifting and flickering like a flame. It had no distinct features, but its presence was overwhelming, pressing down on her like a physical weight. "You don't belong here," the shadow said, its voice reverberating through the corridor. "I'm trying to leave," Anna replied, her voice shaking. The shadow tilted its head, as if amused. "Leave? You think it's that simple?" Anna clenched her fists. "What do you want from me?" The shadow didn't answer immediately. Instead, it raised a hand, pointing toward the door. "Go ahead. Open it. See where it leads." Anna hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to turn back. But she had no other choice. Slowly, she grasped the doorknob and pushed it open. On the other side was a room she recognized. A familiar office space with gray cubicles, fluorescent lighting, and the faint hum of computers. It was her old job, the one she had quit years ago in search of something better. The room was eerily empty, devoid of people. Papers fluttered on desks, and monitors displayed nonsensical static. Anna stepped inside cautiously, her shoes clicking on the tiled floor. "This isn't real," she told herself, but the place felt tangible, as if she had truly stepped back in time. A faint sound caught her attention, the soft tapping of keys. She followed the noise, weaving through the cubicles until she reached the source. Sitting at one of the desks was herself. The other Anna sat hunched over a keyboard, her face pale and gaunt. Her fingers moved rapidly across the keys, but the screen was blank. "What is this?" Anna whispered. The other Anna stopped typing and slowly turned to face her. Her eyes were hollow, dark voids that seemed to draw in all the light around them. "You left me here," the other Anna said, her voice devoid of emotion. "No," Anna stammered. I quit. I moved on. "You abandoned me," the figure repeated, standing up. It towered over Anna, its form stretching unnaturally. "You ran away thinking you could escape, but you can't outrun your choices." Anna stumbled back as the figure advanced, its face twisting and distorting. "This isn't real," she shouted, trying to convince herself. The figure stopped abruptly, its head tilting. "Isn't it?" The walls of the office began to ripple, the cubicles collapsing into the floor. The fluorescent lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. When the lights returned, Anna was back in the elevator. She gasped, her hands gripping the metal railing for support. The elevator was moving again, its hum vibrating through her body. "What just happened?" she muttered, trying to steady her breathing. The button panel was different now. Instead of numbers, the buttons were labeled with strange symbols that glowed faintly. One of them pulsed with light, drawing her attention. Anna hesitated before pressing it. As soon as her finger touched the button, the elevator jolted, and the doors slid open. This time, she stepped into a dimly lit room filled with mirrors. Her reflection stared back at her from every angle, but something was off. The reflections didn't match her movements. She raised her hand, and the reflections delayed, moving seconds after she did. One of them smiled, though Anna hadn't. "Not again," she whispered, backing away from the mirrors. The reflections began to move on their own, stepping closer to the glass. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their mouths twisted into sinister grins. One by one, the reflections stepped out of the mirrors, their forms solidifying into shadowy figures. Anna ran, She didn't know where she was going, but the instinct to flee overwhelmed her. The shadow figures pursued her, their footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the empty space. She stumbled through twisting corridors and endless doorways, each one leading to another distorted version of reality. A forest where the trees whispered her name. A beach where the waves carried screams instead of surf. A city street where everyone's faces were blank. Each place was more surreal and terrifying than the last, but the shadow figures followed her through them all. "Stop running," one of them hissed, its voice slithering into her ears. But she couldn't stop. She wouldn't. Finally, she burst through a door and found herself back in the elevator. The shadow figures stopped at the threshold, unable to enter. Anna collapsed against the wall, her chest heaving. The elevator doors closed, sealing her inside. As the elevator began to move again, Anna noticed something new. A small key lying on the floor. It was old and tarnished, but it seemed important. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. Etched into the metal was a single word: courage. "What is this for?" she wondered aloud. The elevator stopped, and the doors slid open to reveal another hallway. This one was bathed in soft, golden light, a stark contrast to the red corridor from before. A feeling of calm washed over her, though she knew better than to trust it. Clutching the key tightly, Anna stepped out of the elevator, determined to find answers. The golden light bathed the hallway in a warm, soothing glow, unlike anything Anna had encountered so far. The air felt lighter here, as though she had stepped into a completely different world. The whispers, the shadows, and the dread seemed to vanish. But Anna's grip on the old key tightened. The key felt like her only lifeline, a tangible object anchoring her to reality, or whatever semblance of it still existed. She looked around, her shoes clicking softly against the polished marble floor. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings that shimmered in the light, telling stories of places and people she couldn't recognize. "Courage," she muttered, reading the word etched into the key once more. The sound of her voice echoed faintly. At the end of the hallway stood a large wooden door, carved with symbols that seemed to shift and change when she looked at them. It felt alive, as if it were waiting for her. "This has to lead somewhere," she whispered, walking toward it. Anna reached the door and hesitated, her hand hovering over the ornate handle. She felt the weight of invisible eyes on her, watching her every move. Taking a deep breath, she slid the key into the lock. The door clicked open with surprising ease, revealing a circular room with walls made entirely of glass. Beyond the glass was darkness, an infinite void that seemed to stretch forever. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it lay a book. The book glowed faintly, its leather cover etched with the same shifting symbols she had seen on the door. As Anna stepped inside, the door behind her disappeared, leaving her trapped in the strange room. Anna approached the pedestal cautiously, her eyes fixed on the book. The air around it seemed to hum with energy. When she reached out to touch it, the book flipped open on its own, pages fluttering until it landed on one with her name written at the top. Anna Gray, she read aloud, her voice trembling. Below her name was a list of events from her life, choices she had made, paths she had taken. Quitting her job, ending friendships, moving to a new city. Each choice seemed mundane at first, but as she read further, she realized the list went deeper, detailing moments she had buried in her memory. "You can't hide from your past," a voice echoed through the room. Anna spun around, but the room was empty. "Who's there?" The voice didn't answer. Instead, the book's pages flipped again, landing on a blank page. Written in bold letters at the top were the words, "Choose your path." As Anna stared at the page, 3 doors materialized around the room, each glowing faintly. The first door was made of steel, cold and unyielding. The second door was wooden, much like the one she had just entered through. The third door was glass, fragile and transparent, offering a glimpse of swirling clouds beyond. A voice filled the room, deep and resonant. Each door leads to a different reality. Choose wisely, Anna. Anna hesitated, her heart racing. What happens if I choose wrong? The voice didn't answer. She turned to the steel door first. The surface reflected her face, but distorted, showing an older version of herself with tired eyes and gray hair. Then she looked at the wooden door. It felt familiar, almost comforting, but the symbols carved into it pulsed faintly, as if warning her. Finally, she approached the glass door. Through it, she could see faint images. A life that looked peaceful, but the swirling clouds suggested chaos lurking beneath the surface. Anna's instincts drew her to the wooden door. Felt like the right choice, even if she couldn't explain why. Gripping the handle tightly, she pulled it open and stepped through. She found herself in a dimly lit room that felt oddly familiar. The furniture, the wallpaper, even the faint scent of lavender. It was her childhood home. "This isn't real," she whispered, her voice cracking, but the warmth of the room felt real. The soft hum of the ceiling fan, the distant sound of laughter. It was all too convincing. "Anna," a voice called from the kitchen. Her breath caught in her throat. It was her mother's voice, clear and unmistakable. But her mother had passed away years ago. "Come here, sweetheart." The voice called again, warm and inviting. Anna's feet moved on their own, carrying her toward the kitchen. The kitchen was exactly as she remembered it. Her mother standing by the stove, humming a tune as she stirred a pot. She turned to Anna with a smile, her eyes sparkling. "Dinner's almost ready," her mother said. Tears welled up in Anna's eyes. "Mom!" Her mother approached her, wiping her hands on a towel. "What's wrong, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." I don't understand," Anna stammered. "You're not supposed to be here." Her mother's smile faltered. For a brief moment, her eyes flickered, turning completely black before returning to normal. Anna took a step back. "You're not real." Her mother sighed, her expression shifting to one of sorrow. "Why can't you just be happy, Anna? Why do you always have to question everything?" The room began to dissolve around her, the walls peeling away like paper. Her mother's form twisted, becoming shadowy and grotesque. "You'll never escape," the figure hissed, lunging at her. Anna screamed and stumbled backward, hitting a wall. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the elevator, the wooden door gone. Her hands were shaking, the key still clutched tightly in her grip. The elevator was moving again, but this time, the hum felt different, deeper, more ominous. The button panel had changed again, displaying only one glowing symbol, a spiral. "What do you want from me?" Anna yelled at the empty space, her voice echoing. The elevator stopped abruptly, and the doors slid open to reveal a pitch-black void. A faint voice whispered from the darkness, "Step forward, Anna." Anna's breath caught in her throat as the whisper lingered in the air. "Step forward, Anna." The void beyond the elevator doors was absolute. No ground, no light, just an endless, impenetrable darkness. Her hands trembled, the old key still pressed tightly in her grip. She wanted to scream, but her voice felt stuck. The elevator creaked, its walls groaning as though they could collapse at any moment. "What happens if I don't?" she whispered to the emptiness. The elevator didn't answer, but deep within the void, faint lights began to flicker, forming an uneven path. The whispers returned, this time overlapping and louder. "Step forward. Trust us." Anna stared at the key in her hand. The word courage etched on its surface almost mocked her hesitation. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. As soon as her foot left the elevator, a solid surface materialized beneath her, smooth and cold like glass. The elevator disappeared behind her, its comforting confinement replaced by the vast unknown. The lights on the path pulsed faintly, urging her forward. Anna walked cautiously, her footsteps echoing into the void. With each step, the whispers grew louder, transforming into fragments of voices she recognized. "Why didn't you call me back, Anna?" a voice asked. It was Lisa, her old friend who she had drifted apart from years ago. "You said you'd help me, but you didn't," another voice accused. This one belonged to her ex-boyfriend, Greg. The voices swirled around her, growing sharper, angrier. "Stop!" Anna shouted, her voice breaking. "You're not real." The path beneath her feet trembled, but she forced herself to keep moving. The glowing path led to a narrow bridge suspended over the same endless void. On the other side of the bridge stood a towering archway, its surface shimmering like liquid gold. As Anna stepped onto the bridge, the whispers turned into screams. Figures began to emerge from the void, shadowy, distorted versions of people she knew. Greg appeared first, his face twisted in anger. "You always ran away when things got hard, Anna. That's all you ever do." Lisa followed, her shadowy form flickering. "You're selfish, Anna, always putting yourself first." More figures joined them. Her old boss, a childhood friend, even strangers she barely remembered. Their voices rose into a cacophony, accusing her, blaming her. "Go away," Anna shouted, covering her ears. "You're not real." The shadows froze, their heads tilting in unison. Then, in a single voice, they whispered, "But we are your truth." The glowing path led to a narrow bridge suspended over the same endless void. On the other side of the bridge stood a towering archway, its surface shimmering like liquid gold. As Anna stepped onto the bridge, the whispers turned into screams. Figures began to emerge from the void, shadowy, distorted versions of people she knew. Greg appeared first, his face twisted in anger. "You always ran away when things got hard, Anna. That's all you ever do." Lisa followed, her shadowy form flickering. "You're selfish, Anna, always putting yourself first." More figures joined them. Her old boss, a childhood friend, even strangers she barely remembered. Their voices rose into a cacophony, accusing her, blaming her. "Go away," Anna shouted, covering her ears. "You're not real." The shadows froze, their heads tilting in unison. Then, in a single voice, they whispered, "But we are your truth." Anna ran across the bridge, her heart pounding. The shadows didn't follow, but their whispers lingered, echoing in her mind. As she reached the golden archway, the surface rippled like water, inviting her to step through. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the edge. "What's on the other side?" she asked aloud, though she didn't expect an answer. The archway shimmered brighter, as if urging her forward. With a deep breath, Anna stepped through. On the other side, Anna found herself in a circular room lined with mirrors. Each mirror reflected a different version of her. Some younger, some older, some that didn't look like her at all. She approached one mirror and saw herself as a child, sitting on the floor with a toy in her hand. The little girl looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "You're going to leave me," the child whispered. Anna stepped back, her chest tightening. In another mirror, she saw an older version of herself, alone in a dark apartment. The older Anna looked at her with hollow eyes. "This is your future if you keep running." The room grew colder, and the mirrors began to crack. One by one, the images shattered, leaving only jagged shards reflecting the void. As the last mirror shattered, the floor beneath Anna began to shift. A staircase emerged, spiraling downward into the darkness. The whispers returned, softer this time, almost comforting. "This is your final test, Anna." She descended the staircase, each step feeling heavier than the last. The air grew colder, and the darkness around her seemed to press closer. At the bottom of the staircase was a single door, plain and unremarkable. The old key in her hand began to glow faintly, as if it belonged to this door. Anna inserted the key into the lock, her hands shaking. The door creaked open, revealing a small room with a single chair in the center. On the chair sat a figure, cloaked in shadow. The figure raised its head, revealing a face identical to Anna's. "Who are you?" Anna demanded, her voice barely steady. "I'm you," the figure replied, its voice calm and eerily familiar. "The part of you that you've been avoiding." Anna clenched her fists. "What do you want from me?" The figure stood, mirroring her every move. "This isn't about what I want. It's about what you need. You've spent your life running, hiding from your fears, your regrets, your truths. It's time to stop." Anna felt a surge of anger. "I'm not afraid of you." The figure smiled faintly. "Then prove it." The room began to dissolve, the walls crumbling into the void. Anna was left standing on a small platform, the figure still facing her. Two paths appeared, one leading back to the elevator, the other disappearing into the darkness. "You can go back," the figure said. "Back to the life you know, the safety of denial. Or you can face the unknown, embrace the truth, and finally move forward." Anna looked at the two paths, her heart pounding. She thought about everything she had seen, the voices she had heard, the fears she had confronted. Taking a deep breath, she stepped toward the unknown. Anna stepped into the darkness, her heart racing but her resolve steady. The void swallowed her whole, and for a moment, it felt like falling, weightless, endless, terrifying. Then, with a sudden jolt, she landed on solid ground. Blinking, Anna realized she was no longer in the void. Instead, she stood in a world that felt eerily familiar yet disturbingly wrong. The sky was a deep, unnatural shade of red, and the air carried a strange hum that vibrated through her body. Buildings lined the streets around her, but they were warped, leaning at odd angles and glowing faintly, as if alive. The road beneath her feet pulsed with a heartbeat-like rhythm. She whispered to herself, "Where am I now?" The city appeared deserted. Shadows moved in the corner of her vision, but whenever Anna turned, nothing was there. The silence was heavy, broken only by the low hum in the air. She walked cautiously down the street, gripping the old key tightly in her hand. It no longer glowed but felt warm, as if guiding her. As Anna passed a broken window, she heard faint laughter. She froze, her eyes scanning the building. Inside, she saw figures. A family sitting around a dining table, laughing and talking. But something was wrong. Their movements were jerky, their faces blurred, and their laughter didn't match their expressions. Anna stepped back, her stomach churning. The figures turned toward her in unison, their heads tilting unnaturally. "Join us," they said in a hollow, robotic voice. "No," Anna whispered, her voice trembling. She turned and ran, the sound of their laughter chasing her down the street. As she ran, Anna felt eyes on her. The shadows that lingered in the corners of her vision seemed closer now, watching her every move. She stopped to catch her breath, leaning against a warped lamppost. That's when she saw it. A figure standing at the end of the street. It was tall and thin, its body wrapped in tattered black fabric that fluttered despite the still air. Its face was obscured by a hood, but Anna could feel its gaze piercing through her. "Who are you?" she called out, trying to sound braver than she felt. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised a long, bony hand and pointed to the glowing key in her hand. "What do you want?" Anna asked again, her voice shaking. The figure tilted its head, then disappeared into the shadows. Left alone, Anna felt her resolve falter. But before she could dwell on her fear, the key in her hand began to glow again. It pulsed with light, guiding her toward a nearby building. The structure was small and nondescript, its door slightly ajar. Anna hesitated, then pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was empty except for a table in the center, where a single piece of paper lay. Anna approached cautiously, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. The paper had only 3 words written on it. "Trust the unknown." What does that even mean? Anna muttered, frustrated. The door slammed shut behind her, making her jump. She spun around, but the room was empty, the walls closing in with an oppressive silence. The key pulsed again, and the table began to dissolve, revealing a trapdoor underneath. Anna hesitated, but there was no other way out. She pulled the door open and peered into the darkness below. A narrow staircase spiraled down, disappearing into the void. Taking a deep breath, Anna descended, her footsteps echoing around her. The air grew colder with each step, and the darkness seemed to press against her. Whispers began to fill the space, soft and indistinct, like a distant crowd. When she reached the bottom, she found herself in a vast cavern lit by an eerie, flickering light. At the center stood a massive clock, its hands spinning wildly. The clock towered over Anna, its face cracked and its mechanisms exposed. She felt drawn to it, as if it held the answers she sought. As she stepped closer, the whispers grew louder, resolving into distinct voices. "Time is running out," they said. "Make your choice." The key in her hand began to glow brighter, and she noticed a keyhole at the base of the clock. "Is this it?" she asked aloud. "Is this what I'm supposed to do?" The whispers didn't answer, but the clock's hands slowed, pointing directly at her. Anna hesitated, then inserted the key into the lock. As soon as the key turned, the cavern began to shake. The clock's hands spun wildly, and the light grew blinding. Anna shielded her eyes, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet. When the shaking stopped, she opened her eyes to find herself back in the elevator. But something was different. The buttons on the panel no longer had numbers. Instead, they displayed cryptic symbols: an eye, a tree, a flame, and a spiral. The elevator doors remained closed, and the hum of the machinery filled the small space. Anna stared at the buttons, her mind racing. She knew this was another test, another step in the journey. She reached out and pressed the button with the eye. Anna's finger trembled as she pressed the button with the eye symbol. A soft hum vibrated through the elevator, growing louder and deeper until it felt as though the walls themselves were breathing. She braced herself, heart pounding, as the elevator jerked violently, then began to ascend. The eye symbol on the button started glowing faintly, casting an eerie light across the small space. A voice, soft, almost a whisper, filled the air around her. "Anna," it said, her name stretching out in an unnatural echo. "Who's there?" Anna demanded, her voice cracking. The elevator stopped abruptly, throwing her off balance. The doors slid open without a sound, revealing a long, dark hallway that seemed to stretch endlessly into nothingness. Anna stepped out cautiously, her shoes clicking on the cold, stone floor. The air was thick and heavy, carrying a faint metallic smell that made her stomach churn. Shadows danced along the walls, though there was no visible light source. Each step echoed unnervingly, as if something or someone was following her. "Keep going," The whispering voice urged, softer now but persistent. Anna clenched her fists. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? The voice didn't respond, but the shadows around her shifted, forming shapes that were almost human. They reached out with shadowy hands, their fingers brushing the edges of her vision before disappearing. At the end of the hallway, Anna reached a large, ornate door. It was carved with intricate patterns that seemed to move when she looked directly at them. She pushed it open, revealing a circular room lined with mirrors. Each mirror reflected her, but the images weren't the same. In one, she saw herself as a child, sitting on her grandmother's lap. Her grandmother was smiling, but her eyes were dark and empty. In another, she was older, standing in an unfamiliar room with tears streaming down her face. She was holding something, a photograph, but the image was too blurred to make out. What is this? Anna whispered, turning in a slow circle. The voice returned, louder this time. Your past, your future, your truth. The reflection in the largest mirror stepped forward, pressing its hands against the glass. You must choose, Anna, it said, its voice identical to hers. Choose what? She asked, her voice shaking. The reflection smiled, a cold, hollow smile. To let go, or to remain trapped? Anna felt a pull toward the largest mirror, as if it was calling to her. The reflection extended its hand through the glass, and Anna gasped as cold fingers brushed her own. If you let go, the pain will end, the reflection said. But if you stay, you'll have to face what's waiting. Anna hesitated. I don't understand. Let go of what? The reflection's eyes darkened. Everything that holds you back. The fear, the guilt, the questions you're too afraid to ask. The shadows in the room grew darker, closing in around her. The mirrors cracked, the sound sharp and deafening. Anna clenched the glowing key in her hand. No, she said firmly. I won't just give up. I need answers. The reflection's face twisted into a snarl, and the hand withdrew. The mirrors shattered all at once, sending shards flying around the room. The room dissolved into darkness, and Anna found herself back in the elevator. The glowing buttons had changed again. This time, only one remained, a spiral symbol pulsing faintly. Taking a deep breath, she pressed it. The elevator began to descend, faster and faster, until the walls blurred. Anna gripped the rail, her knuckles white, as the hum turned into a deafening roar. Suddenly, the elevator stopped with a jarring thud. The doors opened to reveal a vast, open field under a starless sky. In the distance, she saw a single light glowing faintly. Anna stepped out, the cool grass crunching beneath her feet. The air was still, the silence absolute. She walked toward the light, her heart pounding with each step. As she drew closer, she realized the light was coming from a small lantern sitting atop a wooden table. On the table was a book, its pages blank except for the first line. To know the truth, you must look within. What does that mean? Anna murmured, running her fingers over the page. The book began to glow, and words appeared, forming sentences that told her story. Her entire life, every moment, every decision, every fear. Tears filled her eyes as she read, the weight of her past crashing down on her. But as she turned the pages, she saw something else. Her strength, her resilience, her determination. The book's final page was blank except for a single question. Are you ready to move forward? Anna closed her eyes, gripping the key tightly. Yes, she whispered. The book dissolved into light, and the field around her began to fade. She felt herself being pulled upward, weightless and free. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the elevator. The buttons were gone, the panel blank. The doors slid open, revealing the lobby where her journey had begun. Anna stepped out, the world feeling sharper, clearer, and more alive. The lobby was empty, but she no longer felt alone. She turned to look at the elevator one last time. The doors closed silently, and the panel above flickered. Out of service, Anna smiled, slipping the now-cool key into her pocket. She walked out into the night, ready to face whatever came next.